endometriosis affects an estimated 200 million women worldwide. Information and misinformation. I must actually be insane, hiding in the dark.
25 years.
I'm Amanda Marie Fuller, and I am more than 1 in 10 people who have endometriosis. Hi, I'm Amanda Marie Fuller. Welcome back to That Endopod. This is part 2 of episode 1, so let's get into it. Where were we? Oh yeah, curveball. So it's the beginning of 2019. My husband Matthew and I have just finally caved to get an Equinox membership. Now, if you don't know, Equinox is a very fancy gym that is very overpriced. Sorry, or just expensive and has exquisite facilities. So, very much worth the price if you can afford it. And at the time, I think we were on like a New Year's resolution kick to get our asses in shape or something. And we had debated joining Equinox for years, but couldn't justify paying that much for a gym. And for some reason, we finally were just like, screw it. Let's do it. Let's join. Let's get in shape. Let's do it in style, We were very stoked. Unfortunately, this coincided with a time where my health just went pew, crashing and burning. A complete nosedive of health crap. Everything was just deteriorating very rapidly. And so we had this new gym membership, but I couldn't get my ass to the gym. I felt so shitty. And I remember one day I was so pissed that we were spending that money on it and that I couldn't make it. And I remember that they have really amazing facilities. They have jacuzzi, steam room, all that stuff. And jacuzzis or hot tubs or hot baths or any form of hot water tub situation is kind of my go-to for self-care. It's kind of the only thing that's really helped ease the pain or at least comfort me when I'm having an endo flare. So it's all I really knew that worked in terms of self-care. So even though I wasn't really feeling, a jacuzzi is going to help all this new stuff that I'm feeling feel better, I just was like, let's go try it, right? So I get my ass in the car, I drive to the local Equinox, and then I sit in the car for up to an hour because I can't get out of the car. That's how fatigued and lethargic I was. I remember my head just feeling like a dead weight on the steering wheel, and I couldn't lift my arms to open the door. It was not good, y'all. So finally, after about an hour of this, of just sitting in the parking garage, unable to get out of the car, I summoned up enough strength to do it. And I entered the facilities. I went to the locker room. I changed. I got into the jacuzzi. And about 30 seconds later, I got out of the jacuzzi. I remember just being like, nope, this isn't right. This doesn't feel right. Nope, I gotta get out of this, which was very different for me. That was not usually my response to getting into a jacuzzi. So I got out, changed, somehow made it back to the car and made it back home or to my best friend's house where I was staying at the time. I don't remember why I was staying there. So much is a blur. Anyway, that's just an example of kind of where I was at in terms of my health at this point. So on April 1st, 2019, I wrote to Dr. Orbuck regarding how I was feeling. We had been going back and forth. Her office and I had been going back and forth because they needed some records and health records of mine and stuff to potentially treat me in other ways for endo. So they were trying to get all of their stuff together in that regard, and it had taken me a while to get back to them. So I was emailing them to explain why and also be like, help, what's happening? This is all new and scary, and I'm scared. So this is a part of what I wrote to her on April 1st. A couple weeks ago, I had an entire day of nonstop stabbing in my uterus. I know that's a common symptom of endo, and I'm used to it to a certain degree, but this was different. It was nonstop for almost 24 hours straight. Just a sharp, quick, constant stabbing. Since then, it comes and goes, but not in the same way. Also, since then, for 2 weeks now, I've had extreme intense nausea, and I've barely been able to eat, which is abnormal for me. I've been forcing myself to eat, but can barely hold anything down. My calorie intake is anywhere from 600 to 1,000 calories a day. My appetite is completely gone, and when I do force myself to eat, the nausea gets worse. I'm used to chronic diarrhea and constipation and pain, but the nausea is new and relentless. Simultaneously, my chronic fatigue has become debilitating. It's not that I'm just exhausted. It's not that I can't move. It feels like I am in molasses. Can barely lift my head or arms and keep my eyes open. It almost feels like I'm drugged. On good days, I can get up, but after a few minutes of moving around at all, I have to lie back down. On top of all this, my pain has been debilitating as well. The unusual thing is that I haven't bled or spotted or anything for really 7 weeks now. On March 7th, I started to feel my PMS symptoms, cramps, extreme breast pain, enlargement, etc., and all the other good stuff. I started tracking it because I'm trying to get better at that and assuming that I would start bleeding within the week, but now it's April 1st. The symptoms haven't gone away or gotten any better, and I still haven't bled. Now, you have to keep in mind that I had just gotten all of that blood work done from the endocrinologist, and I had been doing a bunch of research with all of those results, and a lot of the things that came back kind of like weird or off that he seemed to just kind of blow over and not pay any attention to, but I was like, that's not normal. Why aren't we paying attention to that? All of the research that I was doing with those things all kind of pointed in the direction of ovarian cancer. And there's a family history of ovarian cancer in my family. So those test results leading in that direction, combined with these shitty new symptoms that I was feeling and how bad they got, I was a little bit concerned. I was a lot a bit concerned. Everyone was concerned. My best friend was like, "You're not eating pasta. What's happening?" I also couldn't drink alcohol. You see where this is going probably. But like we went out to celebrate one night for something and I didn't want any drinks. And she was like, "What is happening with you?" She actually called my husband because my husband was working in Denver at the time. So we were separated by location, and she reached out to him and she was like, "I'm worried about Amanda. Something is not right." So just to paint the picture, but that combination of things led me to be concerned about ovarian cancer specifically. And Dr. Orbuck agreed. She thought that it was something that we should definitely look into. So she sent me to get an MRI. On April 4th, 2019, I went in to get an MRI to look for any evidence of ovarian cancer. And instead, they found my son. Surprise! Curveball, to say the least. A very welcome curveball. It's really funny because I remember distinctly the technicians in the lab kept asking me very suspiciously, "Are you sure you can't be pregnant? Is there any chance that you could be pregnant? Oh my gosh, I remember they had me write down, because you fill out all the paperwork and you check off, I'm not pregnant, or there's no chance that I could be pregnant or whatever, and I'd done all that. They had me then go back and write in my own writing, "I am not pregnant," and had me initial that. And I was just like, why are we pressing me on this? I'm a grown woman. First of all, let's not go down that rabbit hole, because I have been told by multiple specialists at this point that with my ovarian reserve and my hormones all out of whack, and the fact that my uterus is completely tilted to the left and crushing my left ovary, that it is virtually impossible for me to get pregnant. So I was very convinced that this wasn't a possibility, and I was kind of annoyed that they kept pressing me on it. That and the fact that because of those tests that I gotten from the endocrinologist. So let me back up. At the time, I hadn't seen my husband for a few months. We'd seen each other once in a few months span because he was working in Denver and I was stuck in La La Land working. And so we had only seen each other for one weekend in February. And I had gotten all that blood work done a few weeks after that. And it definitely would have come up on that blood work if I was pregnant. So all of the things I had been told, as well as the fact that I had evidence that I wasn't pregnant, I just like, there's absolutely no way that I could be. Clearly I was wrong and I felt like a total ass afterwards. But I didn't know. How was I supposed to know? How could I have known that? Life is crazy. Anyway, so my husband and I left that MRI and we went on a stroll in the Upper East Side. We were in part of a neighborhood that we weren't in often, and it's actually near where Marilyn Monroe used to live. And so I was kind of like, let's just stroll in the neighborhood and try and enjoy this beautiful day and keep our mind off of what they may or may not have found in that MRI. And so we did that, and it was really lovely. And then we got in a cab and we headed home. And once we were in the cab, now this is probably less than an hour from when I left the lab, I kept getting a phone call from a number that I didn't recognize. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't pick up the phone if a number that I don't know is calling me. I barely pick up the phone if it's a number I do know. It's kind of an issue with me. So needless to say, I definitely wasn't answering this phone call, but they kept calling, which gave us pause. And so we looked up what the number could be, and it was associated with the imaging lab that we had just left. My heart sank, my stomach turned, and Matthew and I kind of braced ourselves for the worst because we thought they must have found something. If they're calling this quickly, whatever they found must be urgent. So we braced ourselves, and the next time that the number called, we picked up, and on the other line was the radiologist, and he was like, "So, you know that you're pregnant, right?" I was just like, "Huh? What?" No, I think I almost started to argue with him. I was like, no, there's no way. There's no way that I could be pregnant. And he was like, well, you are. Hate to break it to you. I can't tell you if it's a viable pregnancy or not, but there's definitely a human growing inside of you. So you might want to get an ultrasound scheduled and check that out. And Matthew and I were just stunned. We were just flabbergasted. Our whole world turned upside down. Not upside down. Our whole world turned upside right because Hayes is the best thing that's ever happened to us. But at the time, it definitely changed course, let's just say. Especially because it wasn't even on our radar to get pregnant. Because I had been told by so many people that I wouldn't be able to. And we weren't in a place in our lives where we were ready to start a family. We were so focused on our careers that we kind of just said, okay, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. We'll do everything that we can to try. And if we actually can't and they're right, then maybe we'll adopt or we'll see where the road takes us. And we were kind of just chill and open about it. But it was definitely not on our radar. It's the last thing that was on our minds. Needless to say, there was quite an adjustment that needed to be made, and we embraced it in the best possible way that we could, because the truth is, and I think we knew this right away, that, Hayes was our miracle. So lo and behold, we scheduled an ultrasound for a few days after that, and they found not only a very strong heartbeat, but that I was like 7 to 7.5 weeks pregnant at the time, which if we circle back to the email that I had sent Dr. Orbuck, I couldn't have been more spot on, which was crazy for me because you have to know that at this point I've had an entire life of feeling like my body is against me, that it's telling me all the wrong things, that my instincts with my body are wrong, that everything I'm feeling is in my head. I am not to be trusted with what I feel like at this point. That's what I've been told. That's what has been echoed back to me. And here we have concrete evidence of how right I was with my instincts, with my body, because I have an email detailing what I was feeling, which hindsight, obviously they were just early pregnancy symptoms, but at the time, not a possibility. So was just very concerned it was something else. But down to the 7 weeks that I hadn't bled and how unusual that was for me and all of that, here we have like validation that my body is actually doing and saying and telling me all the things that it's supposed to, and it couldn't be more right. That was pretty cool. I love that I have that evidence. So I told Dr. Orbuck in her office the news, and they couldn't be more thrilled. And they basically just said, let's put a pause on the treatment that we're doing for your endo. We don't want to interfere with anything pregnancy related. I'll give you a really good referral to an OBGYN who specializes in having babies. And we'll reconvene after you, God willing, have a healthy pregnancy and a healthy birth. And hopefully the pregnancy will help with your endo. And when we circle back, everything will be better. Didn't end up being the case, but we were hopeful at the time. So then I proceeded to have the healthiest, 7 months, because I was a couple months in at that point, the healthiest 7 months of my life. After that first initial couple months of early pregnancy, where clearly the combination of all the added symptoms just put me into real dire straits. After that kind of normalized, I had a pretty normal pregnancy, which I wasn't sure I was going to have, because that was a part of it going into a pregnancy, knowing that I most likely have endometriosis. How will that affect it? Is that put me more at risk or the baby more at risk? There's so many question marks and so many unknowns. So there was that aspect of it. But physically, I was feeling the best I had ever in my life, because even though I was still having nausea, I couldn't eat for the first 5 months of whatever it was, and all of that. I could deal with that. It was a piece of cake, because the symptoms that I was used to dealing with, the chronic pain that I was used to being in, was gone. It just vanished out of nowhere. And I guess because I wasn't menstruating anymore, and my hormones were finally doing the right thing. They were doing what they were supposed to be doing for the first time in their life. Hallelujah. So it was just a really beautiful experience to be pregnant. And honestly, I wish I could just be pregnant all the time. If that were possible, just to be in a state of pregnancy at all times, that's my dream, because it was the best I've ever felt. I even lost 30 pounds, which makes no sense. Usually you gain weight when you're pregnant. But like I said, because my hormones were actually balanced and doing what they were supposed to, I lost a whole shit ton of weight, while carrying an almost 8-pound baby inside of me. So that was crazy. Then in November of 2019, we had our perfect miracle boy who came after an 83-hour labor, which I'm not going to go into detail on in this episode. It deserves its whole own episode, my labor and my birth. And I do think at this point that it was such a difficult labor because of endometriosis. At the time, I didn't know that there was a connection, but now that I've had my surgery and I know what they found, I'm like, oh, that's probably because of the endo. But I'll get into that at some other point. But he's just the light of my life, and I couldn't be more grateful that I was able to have him, and to my body for making him, despite everything. So we had Hayes in November of 2019. In March of 2020, the whole world shut down. Hi, COVID. I had gone back to work full-time a few weeks after Hayes was born and continued to work till March when everything shut down. And this just led to a whole new chapter of unknowns and all of that. But the other thing that it did is it put my endo journey on hold once again. I breastfed my son for the first 2 years, but even though I was breastfeeding him, I ended up getting my period for the first time about 6 weeks postpartum, which is pretty early and not very typical. And right away, my periods were bad again. So the hope that we had that having Hayes would kind of put an end to the endometriosis journey was pretty quickly squashed. And also what happened at this point is as soon as I started my period, I started to rapidly gain weight again. And within a few months, I was 50 pounds heavier again, which was crazy considering I was breastfeeding and a full-time working mom. If anything, you'd think I would be at my lowest weight ever, but instead I gained all this weight. And so I was just very convinced that the weight gain has some connection with my hormones. Seemed like the evidence was pretty much glaring me straight in the face. So it's interesting because even though weight gain is not a typical symptom of endometriosis, I think it really was for me. I mean, even my surgeon, Dr. Sechkin, was like, this is not, I don't know if these things are connected, but it's pretty clear to me that they are. So I'm curious about that. I'm curious to explore more about that and see if there's any more evidence of that comes up in the future, because I do think there's something about that. Clearly it's not for everybody, but for some patients and for some endo warriors. I'm curious to know if any of you out there have also experienced this correlation or if it's just me. I don't know. So my periods just got worse and worse with each month, but because we were in lockdown for the next coming years, there was really not much I could do about it. But then at the beginning of 2022, things started to open up again, and my husband got a job in Denver, Colorado. And so we road tripped there as a family and stayed there for a few months. And while we were there, I decided to do some self-care and get some acupuncture. And nothing could have prepared me for the reaction that I had. Now, all of the research that I had done up until this point and everything that I'd ever been told was that acupuncture would help with endometriosis symptoms. And I definitely was having really, really bad endo flares pretty consistently, which is why I was like, I need to go see if acupuncture can help me. But in my case, it did the opposite. It sent me into a tailspin of excruciating constant pain. After the first treatment, everything got worse. And I was like, that's odd. But I was committed. I was committed to continuing treatment because maybe it's like triggering something that needs to be triggered. And clearly there's something going on in there. Maybe the acupuncture is, like getting to it in a way that might be necessary and helpful. And so maybe if I continue with this will eventually lead to some sort of breakthrough in my treatment and help. That's not what happened. I ended up having consistent treatments for a few weeks, and it became so bad that I couldn't stand up. There wasn't a moment in the day that I wasn't in excruciating pain. It affected me being able to be a mom, and it scared the shit out of me. I thought, okay, now we're pretty sure I have endo. And one of the things with endo is tumors and cysts and all of that. And at this point, I had read a bunch of stuff about surgeons finding tumors that were the size of basketballs and all that shit. And I had also read some cases of how endo led to death and fatality. And I'm no longer just living for myself. right? I'm living for my kid now. Not that I don't still need to learn how to put myself first. That's so important. That's something I'm still learning. And I think I'll forever be learning, especially because I can't be the best mom that I can be if I'm not the best me. And I can't be the best me if I'm not putting my health first. So all of those things, but also what if there is something really, really bad growing inside of me? Also because I had had such an intense labor and birth that was really, really dark and really traumatic. I was like, maybe something happened during that time, and it just scared me into action. Not to mention, I just couldn't function, and I can't be a good mom if I can't function. So I decided I was going to pursue surgery, and we were heading to New York after Denver, and so I looked into finding the best and most vetted and most experienced endo specialist that I possibly could, and I reached out. And this led to a bunch of remote consultations with Dr. Chu. And they had me do a bunch of testing while I was in Denver, including a colonoscopy, an endoscopy, an MRI, other imaging, and all that. Because in preparation for the surgery that they were going to perform, and because of my history of gastro symptoms, they had to rule out whether or not they needed a surgeon to perform a bowel resection and things of that nature. So I had the colonoscopy, came back perfectly clear once again, and all the imaging didn't really show anything. It showed fibroids and whatnot, but nothing that pointed in the direction of having endometriosis, honestly. Which is just crazy to me. And so we prepared for the surgery, and in May of last year, we had the surgery, and I'll never forget waking up from surgery and Dr. Sechkin standing over me and being all drugged up and delirious, and him just holding my hand and saying, "You're not crazy." And I was like, "You found something? You found something? Are you sure?" Because even up to this point, I don't know if I even believed myself. You know, at this point, I had had multiple specialists tell me that they were 99.9% sure that I had severe endometriosis. And yet I was still so scared and fairly convinced that they were going to go in there and not find anything. And I was just going to be back to where I've always been. But that wasn't the case. They ended up taking out 27 biopsies that were confirmed to be endometriosis, along with my appendix that they took out because it was just riddled with endo, and they were like, "We just need to get this out of your body. This is gross." They found endo on my rectum, vaginal wall, all over my bowels and my intestines, obviously. Under my ovaries, on my ovaries. They lifted my ovaries, which is the most bizarre sensation I think one can ever experience. And I've experienced a lot of sensations, but nothing holds a candle to that. There's no way to describe it. It's pretty insane. So yeah, they found a lot. It was everywhere. Not everywhere. I was actually very lucky. They were able to get all of it out. It wasn't on my lungs or my diaphragm or traveled to my brain or my kidneys. So even though I did have a severe case of endometriosis, grand perspective, I'm one of the lucky ones because it was in the more common areas. Now, one of the side effects I had from surgery is that the feeling in my top right thigh went away. It's come back mostly now, a year later, but not fully, and only just recently to this point. I mean, for the majority of the last year, it's been just completely numb, which I think is a testament to all of the nerve pain, sciatica pain, and all that stuff. Now, I haven't really gone into it because there's so many other things, but I've also experienced lower back pain and extreme sciatica pain and all of that for most of my life as well. I'm sure that all of those things are connected. So they cleaned me up. Thanks, Dr. Sechkin. Thank you, Dr. Chu. And then I was in recovery. And recovery was a bitch, man. I don't know how they make this laparoscopic surgery an outpatient surgical procedure. It doesn't make sense to me. The recovery is no joke. And maybe it has to do with how much they take out and how long they're in there and all of that. I think my surgery was 3 to 4 hours. But regardless, can we work on letting patients stay in the hospital and getting the proper care and treatment they need post-op, please, a little bit more? I mean, come on. The only reason they didn't send me home the first night is because they lifted my ovaries and they had to wait till the next day to release them. I can't believe that's a statement that I'm actually saying. But if it hadn't been for that, I would have been sent home the same day, which is just bonkers. So the next 6 weeks or so, I did my best to focus on recovery, which wasn't the easiest thing to do with a 2.5-year-old, a very, very, very active 2.5-year-old. But we made it through, and he's the best, thank God. And I have an incredible support system with my husband and our nanny. And so we made the best of it and got through it. But it wasn't easy. I started bleeding right away again, and it wasn't pain-free. And that was to be expected because it was a reaction of the trauma in my body from the surgery. Of course, things were getting a little bit worse before they got better. So that wasn't surprising. But it took quite a few months for me to start to feel any relief. But then I did. I did feel some relief. And after a few months, it got so much better that I was like, is this real? Could this be? Could this be happening? Am I having a normal period? I'm going to start crying again, but to have the feeling of, am I experiencing what a normal period feels like for the first time in my life? My cycle was normal. I would bleed 4 to 7 days instead of the 7 to 14 days that I was used to. And my period blood, again, apologies if this is TMI, but it was fresh blood. This is not something that they ever told me growing up. Nobody had ever told me that it wasn't normal to have incredibly richly dark blood filled with clots the size of quarters and golf balls and beyond, and just a horror show. I thought that was normal. Apparently, you could also just have a period where it's bright red, fresh flow blood. I was shocked. And most importantly, I wasn't in pain. I couldn't believe it. I would have my period and be like, I'm bleeding, but I'm not in any pain. It was so foreign to me. So for quite a few months, things just got better and better. And it felt like a miracle. And then I'd say in the beginning of 2023, things started to get worse again. And since then, each month it gets worse. Pain is back, clots are back, long periods are back. I've been on birth control to help regulate the endometriosis, to help keep our hormones balanced. That's the goal, at least. Doesn't feel like it's working, so that's a conundrum. Apparently I need to rework that a little bit. I've also been having intermenstrual bleeding, and it's all over the place, and things aren't good. I have endo flares pretty consistently now, so it's come back. Like I said, there is no cure. I was hoping that the positive effects of the surgery were going to last longer than a few months, but apparently that's not the case with me. So here I am. I was very, very fortunate to have access to one of the absolute best surgeons and endo specialists. I don't know where I would be had I not had the surgery, how much worse it would be, because they cleared me out, yo. Like, they cleared me out good. So God only knows how bad it would be had I not had access to that surgery, which was out of pocket, by the way, because insurance doesn't cover it. And it's one of the reasons why we basically spent all of our savings making that surgery happen. So it's put us in kind of a limbo, but that is what it is. And I'm just living in this reality that the damage that the endo did for 25 years of my life is damage done. Clearing all of it out doesn't erase all of the damage that it already caused. That's a hard reality to face. I don't really know what I'm going to do from here on out. I'm not intending to have another surgery anytime soon. I want to keep the possibility of having another child open, so I'm not ready to have a hysterectomy, though I am considering that at this point. Dr. Sechkin also was suspicious that I do have adenomyosis. He couldn't determine that from the surgery that they performed, but he's suspicious of that and didn't rule it out. So my hunch is that that's quite possibly a reality. And in that case, a hysterectomy would be the best treatment. I also want to start living the life of the quality that I deserve. And if getting a hysterectomy is the best way to do that, the best way for me to be the best mom that I can be to the child that I was so blessed to have, then so be it. Maybe that's what I'll do. But I'm not there yet. Time will tell. So there you have it, folks. Most of Amanda Marie Fuller's medical history in full detail. Thanks for listening. Through all of that, I hope that it sparked a light bulb for at least one person listening, or made one person feel less alone and more heard and more validated, or made one person decide that they were going to seek treatment, seek hope in a new way or a different way, or just at all, if they need to, because that's the whole purpose. We have to be here for each other to help advocate for each other so we can better advocate for ourselves. Don't let your journey be 25 years and counting. The next episode, we'll be listening to somebody else's journey. And after that, we'll have on an expert to start answering some questions that we all have. So send those questions in. You can write me at thatendopod@gmail.com or DM me the Instagram page or wherever else you can message me. I don't really know how all of this works yet, so bear with me as I get my legs underneath me with it all. And also, last but not least, if you are an endo warrior and you feel like your story could help others and you are brave enough to come on here and have a conversation with me and share your story with the world, please reach out. I want to do anything that I can to help build this community so that we can all help each other, because we are not alone, we are not crazy, and we deserve better. Until next time, thanks for listening to That Endopod.